Welcome back. And the man in the straw hat is in the house. That would be Rod Martin, the chairman of the board of the Institute for the American Future, which makes this program possible, for which we are profoundly grateful. He is a man who is a member in good standing of what has been known as the Teal Mafia. He was there at the beginning of the PayPal endeavor that put Peter on his present trajectory. We're delighted to have him with us always, especially to pick his brains, his I call them free range brains, about the world around us and some of the things that he's covering in a terrific blog. He calls it the rodmartin.org blog. And I encourage you all to subscribe. It is a tremendously informative resource. Rod, welcome back. It's good to have you with us, sir.
Thank you. And it's the Rod Martin Report, but the URL is rodmartin.org. And we do encourage everybody to come. We've got about 25,000 new subscribers in the last 90 days and about 222,000 new followers on X. So
Fabulous.
Clearly there's something worth seeing.
You are definitely somebody worth following, that's for sure. Congratulations, Rod. That's great news. So a couple of things I wanted to touch base with you on. The Senate is, as we speak, going to be addressing itself to the big, beautiful bill, as it's called, coming out of the House of Representatives. The exact character of what the Senate will do to it is not yet determined, but it seems likely to muck about a bit. First of all, level set with us. What did you make of the bill that came out of the House, A? And B, what do you think the Senate is likely to do, and for that matter, I guess C, should do about it?
Well, if we focus on cuts, it obviously was disappointing. But if we focus more correctly, I think, on what in a CBO context we might call dynamic scoring, what it does is it makes the Trump tax cuts permanent. It also eliminates taxes on tips and on overtime work. So it's a big boost to working class Americans who have started voting in big numbers for President Trump and for Republicans generally. It's also a big shot in the arm to the U.S. economy. So while on paper, using static scoring, the Democrats can certainly say, oh, well, this adds so much to the deficit. Well, it might. I mean, it's not impossible, but the actual history of tax cuts has been that they multiply tax revenues because you have more economic activity on which taxes are being paid, and the lower percentage actually gets you more dollars. So I think when you couple that with some changes in the Senate that I really believe will be pretty beneficial, not all of them may be, but I think some will. I think Ron Johnson and Rand Paul are onto some things that could be really helpful. You add into that tariff revenue on countries that are intransigent and don't want to make a proper deal. You add that to that $8 trillion in new manufacturing investment just since Trump took office again. And you add to it, lower inflation, better interest rate environment, which is going to have to be the case within the next 6 months. And I think you get a boom, and that boom starts, and I left out energy, that boom starts making a real dent, certainly in the deficit, but I think ultimately in the debt. And we saw that in the 90s. Nobody expected the surplus when it came, and we would have maintained those surpluses had it not been for 9/11. So I think you could see the same effect here, an unexpected surplus that starts translating into real debt repayment, and we could be on a really good track. And I think the seeds of that are here.
And what will determine whether it works out that way or not, as you understand the dynamics, if you wish to use that word?
Well, dynamic is the right word because there are a lot of moving parts here. Everything I just said is predicated on an economic boom that I think is already beginning. And so, without growth, you simply can't get out from under the kind of debt we've amassed. We've amassed so much debt just in the last 4 years. It's just crippling. And if we didn't have the world's reserve currency, we'd be toast. Now, it doesn't look like anybody's going to be able to meaningfully challenge that anytime soon, so that's good. But, if they did, we'd really be in a world of hurt, and the Beltway establishment does not care.
Let me ask you about that reserve currency business, because I agree with it. That's a big swinger here. We're told that the so-called BRICS nations meeting in Rio de Janeiro next month are going to make a serious run at displacing the dollar. Is it your view that they still don't have any alternative, and the aspirations being what they are is one thing, but being able to make it happen is another?
Well, a junior high student can make a run at joining the NFL, but he's not going to make it. And this is the thing. Everybody thinks Russia is big and bad. Russia has an economy slightly smaller than Texas. And 15 years ago, it was slightly smaller than California, so it shrunk dramatically in a 15-year span. And they're not doing that well militarily. They're certainly not the globe-girdling power that they pretended to be before the war, and that a lot of us, questioned whether they might be. Yes, they have a lot of nukes. They don't have a lot else. And so Russia can't possibly supplant the dollar and doesn't have the economy to support any such thing. South Africa, are you kidding? Brazil, and then you get into China, and China's economy is in real trouble, but add to that the yuan isn't even convertible. So, how are you going to support global transactions in a way necessary to displace the dollar when you don't even have a convertible currency, and it actually destroys your own economic policy to make it convertible? These things just aren't going to happen.
Okay. This is the best news I've had recently, and I pray that you are absolutely correct on this, as you are on most things. Rod Martin is with us. We're going to take a short break. On the other side of it, we're going to talk a bit about revolution, counter-revolution, counter-revolution, and perhaps counter-revolution. Well, the author of the Rod Martin Report. Check it out at rodmartin.org. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Rod Martin is with us. I'm very pleased to say. Rod is, of course, a man whose wide-ranging thinking on so many topics is of great importance, and I'm delighted to be able to showcase them here each week. Not least because one of the things he's teasing at the moment on his site, the rodmartin.org site, that is a forthcoming book entitled Essays on the Counter-Revolution. And I want you to walk us through what you mean by counter-revolution in this context, Rod. We're familiar, of course, with the American Revolution. So what was the counter to it? And where do we stand with it now?
The American Revolution is the only real revolution in history when you get right down to it, which is the exact opposite of what all of our Marxist poli-sci grad students and professors taught us. But they're just wrong. All of the communist revolutions, beginning with the French Revolution, were just transferring authoritarian or totalitarian power from one elite to the next. The American Revolution actually collapsed all social classes down to two, just free men and slaves. And you can say, okay, well, there were rich people. There are always rich people. The 80-20 rule applies even in Soviet Russia. So, of course there were rich people, but that's not the same thing as dukes and earls. And so the American Revolution was really quite extraordinary, and then the Civil War comes back and doubles down on that and creates basically one social class. And okay, if you're a black guy in Georgia in 1870, that may not actually work out that way for you, but you can go to Chicago, or you can go homestead in Kansas, and you're absolutely free. So the American Revolution builds for 160 years. And then along comes FDR. And the Depression era gave us the New Deal, which was honestly a counter-revolution. I'm going to call it the revolution for the purposes of the book because I don't want the title to be Essays on the Counter-Revolution. But FDR carried out what amounted to a silent coup, and there's no escaping it. But it wasn't obvious at the time. I mean, a lot of people opposed what he was doing. But what he created was this web of administrative agencies that allegedly have independent power. Well, here's how that works in the real world. They get legislative, executive, and judicial power. And for 40 years under the Chevron ruling, they actually had judicial power that couldn't be appealed to an Article III court. So what you have is, in effect, a series of subject matter dictatorships. And the reason that's beneficial from a Democrat point of view is they staffed all of those agencies 100% with Democrats. So what happens is they don't buck FDR, they do whatever he wants. They don't meaningfully buck Harry Truman either. But when Dwight Eisenhower becomes president, or Richard Nixon, or Jerry Ford, or Ronald Reagan, or George Bush, or other George Bush, or Trump, you get this permanent deep state that does whatever it wants, follows its own agenda, and its own agenda is not unanchored from American politics. They're all unionized Democrats. So we've had this 90 years of sort of a shadow one-party rule. And Trump is going at it tooth and nail. He is achieving a lot. He's got a long way to go. And the rogue judiciary we're seeing is very much a part of that. They enabled it in the first place, and they are enabling it now. But Trump has taken the battle to the enemy, and that's more than anybody before him, with the only exception of Ronald Reagan, ever did. And in Reagan's defense, let me just say, because a lot of people are criticizing Reagan these days, Reagan was a little busy reinventing the American economy and winning the Cold War and keeping us all from being murdered or enslaved by the Soviets. He couldn't do everything. And it's just exactly, and by the way, never had the House of Representatives. So some of the criticisms of Reagan today are just completely ignorant of history.
I want to come back to the point you just made about the rogue judiciary, because what we are being told is that judicial supremacism is actually rooted in the Constitution. What you're suggesting is that this is actually a revolution against the Constitution that,
yes,
that may have persisted now for many years, but it's still unconstitutional. Anti-constitutional at that. Is that right?
Extremely so, and that has been propagandized at us now for 90 years in much the same way that everyone who is for liberty has been labeled a fascist, which is just absurd. How do you get Donald Trump as a fascist when his first year in office he eliminated 22 regulations for every one new one? He cuts taxes. He reduces the power and reach of government. This is fascism? I mean, Hitler wouldn't recognize it, neither would Mussolini. So, I mean, the labeling that comes from the left's dominance of our educational institutions and the media are just extraordinary, and we have to overcome that. No, the judiciary was designed by the founders to be the weakest, not the strongest branch of government. And the truth is, they are treating the presidency, and have been now for nearly a century, as sort of just a ministerial function. He gets to do what the courts tell him. But that's not the law. The Constitution is clear, and it's the very first part of the first sentence of Article 2. The executive power shall be vested in a president of the United States. And what that means, to be very clear, is not the Attorney General, not a special counsel, not the Secretary of State, not an independent agency, whatever the heck that is. No, in elections. And this is what they really oppose. I understand that if we elect a Barack Obama, he's going to use that power in ways I don't like. But I want to have the right to elect a Donald Trump and him be able to get his and our way. That's what they're standing against.
Yeah, and it's really, to put a fine point on it, the executive authority of the president that is what Article 2 is all about, that is on the line here. And they're trying to redo the Constitution. We've been watching with horror what they're doing in the process, and we'll be talking more about it with you on the next occasion. Thank you so much, Rod. Come back to us soon. I hope the rest of you do the same next time. Until then, go forth and multiply.